Yeah, hi, welcome again. So in this video, we're going to discuss about YugabyteDB deployment models. So far, we have been discussing about the architectural fundamental core components and very high level overview of what Yugabyte is. Now let's get into the different types of deployment models which we can deploy so that we can later get into the installation of one of these models. So typically there are three main deployment models for YugabyteDB. So each catering to a different operational and business needs. So if you see, the first one is a self-managed YBA. So this is important. You can also deploy without YBA, but in a typical production environments, it is very useful or important that we deploy a self-managed especially in self-managed, which is YBA, Yugabyte Anywhere kind of installation. So in this model, uh, basically customers, that is we fully own and operate both the infrastructure and the database layer. So we deploy YugabyteDB anywhere on our chosen platform, whether that's on premises or on public clouds, or you can have Kubernetes clusters, you can deploy anywhere. So the main advantage with this deployment type is what we are going to get is the complete control. So we can decide the topology, security configurations, upgrade schedules, integrating with our existing monitoring tools, to name few. This is particularly valuable for organizations which have very strict compliance requirements or air-gapped environments where you do not want to expose your databases uh, to anywhere outside internet. Or you can have a integration with the Yugabyte DB with our internal systems. You may have your own security tools and monitoring tools where you want to integrate with your existing process. This would be the best fit. So the trade-off is that we are also going to take care of all the operational responsibilities, which may include patching, scaling, backups, disaster recovery. So obviously this requires a strong in-house DBAs and infrastructure teams who understand and capable of handling all this stuff. So let's move on to the second deployment type, which is a fully managed Yugabyte Aeon. So here Yugabyte takes the full responsibility of running the database, which includes provisioning, scaling, patching, monitoring, backups, high availability, you name anything. It's all the responsibility of the Yugabyte team to take care of behind the scenes. So all as a customer or end user, what we are going to do is we are just going to consume the database as a service. So which is much like an RDS or a Aurora Cosmos DB or Dynamo DB. So there you don't worry really about how the underlying infrastructure, right? You just spin up and start connecting and using the database, and you can also have configurations where it can auto scale all stuff. So the key benefit what we get is going to be simplicity. So projects can go from a zero to production ready in minutes, right? So you can just deploy and start using it. So this type of model mostly suits for organizations that prioritize developer velocity and lower operational overhead over granular infrastructure control. So Yugabyte DB also offers cross-region replication, automated failover, compliance certifications out of the box. So it's all like a plug and play. How you handle with your RDS, right? Similarly, if you want, you can have a cross-region replication enabled. You can set up automatic failover, and all this stuff can be done. And they also have a default compliance certification what it is offered, so you can verify and see if that is good enough for your organization. And the third one, that is a co-managed. In co-managed setup, basically as a customer we manage the infrastructure. For example, we provision the VMs. It can be on AWS, Azure, or on premises, or you can have a Kubernetes clusters. While Yugabyte DB handles the database operational layer. So this model gives us the flexibility to keep our infrastructure in our control for security, compliance, or any cost reasons, while still benefiting from Yugabyte DB's automation for cluster management, patching, monitoring, and scaling. So this can be considered as a middle ground between full control and full outsourcing. This is especially attractive for hybrid cloud or building your own cloud strategies. So the key takeaway I believe will be the choice of model depends on our operational maturity, compliance constraints, and how much control versus convenience we want over the database environments. So with that, let's move on to the next slide. So here, this particular architecture diagram I have borrowed from the YugabyteDB documentation. So this gives a very good high-level overview of a typical deployment model, which can be either in on-premises or on any one of the cloud vendors like AWS, Azure, Google, or Kubernetes. So if you look at here we have total 3 data nodes on the right side. If you see database cluster, which is highlighted in blue color, right? So there are 3 data nodes, and in the left side you see YugabyteDB anywhere. There are 2 such VMs you consider. So there are 3 VMs for data nodes and 2 VMs where you run Yugabyte anywhere. And the configuration depends on the kind of data and the volume and the usage. However, for a typical development kind of environment or for understanding or testing, you can have this YBA YugabyteDB anywhere 2 VMs, which can be like a 4 vCPU and 16 GB RAM. That should be good enough for us to get started. And for data nodes also, you can have better 8 vCPU and 64 GB, so that gives you a good kind of environment where you can do a lot of testing on even creating or restoring databases, creating tables, do small loads, and then do a little bit of load testing. All these things you can do if you can have up to 8 vCPU and some 64 GB kind of RAM. So total in this particular architecture, you see there are total 5 VMs required, 3 for data nodes and 2 for YBA. And as we have seen in the past videos, YBA is typically giving us the flexibility where end users will get an URL from where they can look at how the entire universes, clusters, the health status, the metrics. You can configure backups, various security options, G flags. All this can be done through the Yugabyte Anywhere platform. The reason why you have 2 Yugabyte Anywhere platforms is for redundancy. So even in case if you have one of them going down, you still have the other one from where you can continue, and then you can recover your old instance if at all needed from the newer one. So if you see that the people icon on the top there, once the YBA platform is created, it provides an URL. So in order to access that URL, typically you'll be accessing that URL from your laptops mostly, right? So you'll need to have these ports 443 open so that you can open the UI, login, and then look at the various metrics. And if you want to go into and see detailed metrics from Prometheus view, then you need to have the 9090 port as well. And typically the user authentication can be isolated accounts that can be created in the YBA platform, or you can also integrate with LDAP or OAuth kind of things. Further, you need to have some additional prerequisites and requirements where you need to have at least 443 port open to your LDAP or OAuth systems, and then there are other requirements. You need to have a secret manager, connectivity, and all that stuff. So this YugabyteDB Anywhere server hosts primarily 3 components. One will be Prometheus server, another is Postgres service, and then YBA platform service itself. And the Yugabyte service runs typically on not Yugabyte, the Postgres service typically runs on 5432 port on the Yugabyte Anywhere. And these 2 Yugabyte Anywhere platforms will be communicating on the ports 443 and 9090. So we'll have to ensure those ports are open as well as the 5432 ports. And between the Yugabyte Anywhere and the data nodes, there are a bunch of ports that needs to open. So as we discussed before, there are a master process, a T server process. So the master process generally will be running on 7000 or 7001, 7100. So you need to have that connectivity enabled so that YBA can look at the master, get the details about the master on these ports. and the TPT server typically runs on 9091.9100, and then YSQL and YSQL will be accessed via 5433 or 9842 ports. So if you have an application where you want to connect using YSQL, you need to have 5432 port opened from the application to that YBA cluster. And then there is a node exporter process which runs on the YBA, which typically gathers all the metrics and sends it to the YBA platform. So for that it needs 9300 port. And then for APIs to consume the metrics and all, you need to open 12,000 and 13,000 port. And the YBA controller has 18018 and the node agent 9070, and to SSH from the YBA you need to have SSH22 port open. And from the nodes to the YBA you need to have 443 port open. And between the three nodes you need to have the bottom which is internode connectivity. For master servers process to three master servers to communicate with each other should have 7000 and 7100, and for T server process to communicate 9000 9100, and to communicate with the YB controller 18018. And the application, yeah, depending on which protocol you're using, YSQL or YCQL, you need to have the appropriate port 5433 or 9042. And if you want to keep your backups on external storage like S3 or any of blob storage, then you could have the respective 443 port open to the respective cloud VPC and setup. So I hope this gives you a very high level architecture diagram of how typically you would set up a cloud production environment. Bare minimum start with 3 nodes with 8 CPU, 8 vCPU and 64 GB at least to begin with, and then 2 YBA controllers and all these ports, and then you can launch your installation on YBA server. Once you install there, you get access to the UI, and from the UI you can then start the deployment where you can do some configurations of defining how many nodes, replication factor, or what is the availability zones, all this stuff. And then once you click on create universe, it's going to automatically, the YBA itself is automatically going to copy the respective software, install it, configurations, everything is done, and it will give you a ready universe where you can start connecting to that universe and start working on it. Hope this gives you a good idea about how a typical YugabyteDB deployment can be done. This can be done on-premises or on any cloud providers like AWS, Azure or Google, or even you can do this can set up on a Kubernetes cluster. So with that, let me conclude this video, and in the next video hopefully we are going to start looking at one of the deployments of the YugabyteDB. Thank you.